Hello everyone and welcome to this exclusive demo of Recur360 powered by Out-of-the-Box Technology. We were very pleased to meet you all at Scaling New Heights last month in Salt Lake City, and we are excited to show you a little closer look at Recur360 and what this very powerful tool can do for you and help solve any problems for you and your clients. My name is Jennifer and I'm the marketing manager here at Out-of-the-Box Technology and Recur360. I'll be moderating our session today. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and send those over via the chat on your control panel there, and I'll make sure that we address those questions as we're going through the demonstration. I'm excited to have Barb on the line. You may have met her. There's her picture there from Scaling New Heights. She is our Recur360 manager. She knows everything there is to know about Recur360. She works really closely with our developers. She's on the live chat all the time, and she's really the front line for this product that we have. So at this point, Barb, I'm going to hand things over to you, and you can get started with our demo.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. I'm going to go ahead and show my screen here that I have Recur360 logged into. So just, Jennifer, if you can verify that I am showing my correct monitor here with the Recur360 login page.
Yep, I do see that. Perfect.
Okay, wanted to check my screens. So one of the things that I wanted to let you guys know in our Recur360 is that we are able to have multiple QuickBooks accounts attached through one Recur360 login. So I have one email address, my Barb at OOTB Technology, that I log in with. When I go to my main login page and press submit, I'm going to see a list here that I have 2 accounts currently connected to that one login. So similar to QuickBooks Online Accountant Access, where you can simply open up the drop down at the top, switch accounts using one user ID. We have that same concept in Recur360 as well. And you notice here also that my Recur360 login, one of them is connected to a QuickBooks desktop account and one is connected online through this same login. So I have the ability to switch back and forth between those easily with one access point. Let's get started and kind of start off with that desktop account first. So if I click login and press that one, the first time you connect Recur360 to your QuickBooks file, we're going to bring in all of your current customers as well as any open accounts receivable invoices that you have into our collection center and all of the past invoices for those customers as well. So that first initial connection in a QuickBooks desktop environment, we install an application called the QuickBooks Web Connector, which comes with QuickBooks. That's how we communicate to desktop. That will then sync all of the information over here. So I'm going to be able to see here's my entire customer list. As a matter of fact, here's their open balance dues and all of the information that's available to you from that QuickBooks initial sync. Okay, so we kind of help to pre-populate everything for you moving forward in that recurring environment. If I want to look a little bit further in detail at, let's say, this cash sale customer that has that balance open, if I click anywhere in here, I'm going to see the detail of that customer user profile. So here's all of their information, their email, their addresses, any of their history. So here are all of their invoices. The most recent 6 list in the grid here. If I want to see their entire history, I just click this View All Invoices. So here is every invoice to that cash sale customer. There are 17 of them, as well as what their open balances are. And I can see the detail of the invoices as well. If I want to drill in further and see what was that invoice for, I can click right here. That's going to pull up an actual copy of that invoice itself. So when I click this, I see here is the line items that were on those invoices. I can see that it was originally $637. There's been some payments made, but there is still a balance due of $44.46. Now, also in the information about this invoice that came over, if I were to start emailing copies of this to the client, which I can do really quickly just by using this button up at the top here, we'll do in a second, I'm going to be able to see some history of every email you've sent via Recur360 regarding this invoice. So right now, Recur360 hasn't ever sent this invoice out to this client. If I want to send it to the client, I can do it really quickly here just by clicking the Send or Schedule an Invoice button. And when I click that, I bring up a screen that gives me an option. I can send it once immediately right now, or I can schedule it for later. This kind of helps with a automated accounts receivable notices type scenario where I can just say, okay, I want to schedule this and I want this email to go out either on a specific day or every certain number of days. So every 4 days, I want to send this email beginning one day after whatever the due date on it was, which the due date for this one was March of this year, 3/15 of 2019. So this will go out immediately then. And I can say, very overdue, please pay now. And this will be an immediate message up at the top of that email as well, in addition to the email that goes out. And then I can just click this and let the system take over and not have to worry about it. So now, when I look again at that particular invoice here, I'm going to see that that invoice is scheduled to go out every 4 days until that customer pays it or I cancel it. So that, I know I'm kind of skipping around, but I wanted to show you how easy it is to see an invoice, send a copy of it to the customer really quickly, and schedule it so that it's going to keep sending it and you don't have to worry about, are my collection notices going out? Okay, so an automated way for you to do that very easily from within the invoice itself. Okay. Also, when I'm looking at the details of this invoice, I can very quickly get back to the customer name here just by clicking on any of the hyperlinks from within here or using the menu system on the left-hand side of the screen. So that brought me back to the main customer user profile. And now I can see in the email history list that there is that one email that's supposed to go out. Now I have in the past on 3/19 sent that customer an email regarding a different invoice. And not only was it delivered, but that customer clicked on the hyperlink inside of that email. So what that tells me, if I click the detail here, I can see that it was delivered on 3/19 and they clicked on the pay online link that is built into that email on 3/19 also. So just kind of a little more information for you as well, and power in that if that customer says, oh, I never got that invoice, you have some trackability and you can say, well, okay, but it looks like someone opened it or someone clicked on the link inside of it. So you can kind of have that information at your fingertips as well, and a little bit more detail of what the clients are doing with the emails that they got. Now, the rest of this screen here for the customer user profile is going to show me on the bottom right any recurring things that I have set up to do with this client. So right now, this particular client has a new setup recurring invoice that happens every 15th of every month, okay? And it's going to be for $592.80. It's going to happen again next on 7/15. And I can see the detail of it if I click inside of there. We'll do that in just a minute. They also have a recurring payment plan that is not linked to any particular invoice in the system, but I am set to charge them $599. It was set to go every 1 day. That one has finished charging, so it will not happen anymore. Its next recurring period is set to none. So that one's a historical payment plan that they had that they've finished. Okay, so that one's not going to apply anymore. And then the last thing that I want to talk about while I'm in the user profile is some of the information that we save and that flows back and forth between Recur360 and QuickBooks. So if I edit this customer here from within Recur360, any changes that I make to that customer account, if I happen to change their email address, their phone number, anything like that, that information when I press Save and Sync is going to flow back into my QuickBooks file and update the customer information in QuickBooks as well. So it's going to keep the two systems accurate and in sync with each other. And that goes both directions. If you happen to make a change to a customer account directly in QuickBooks Desktop on our next sync, which my sync status has 5 things pending here, that information will update into Recur360 or vice versa. We'll talk about QuickBooks Online and how that information updates too when I switch accounts here. But also, within this cash sale customer, I wanted to show you that you can add and store payment details for this customer. So I can put in a credit card or an ACH account information manually here and save it and use it for future transactions. The customer can also do that through their Pay Online link. So there's 2 ways to get credit card information into the system here, manually through this interface or the customer doing it using the Pay Online link. And I can have multiple payment methods stored here. So I can keep 2 different credit cards and an ACH all in one customer account here. Now, let me go ahead and press Save and Sync. So that'll bring me back to my main customer sales screen. And I want to begin showing you the recurring invoices module. So from that, I see, like I said, this client has a new setup with discounts and fees recurring invoice that's set. If I go look at my entire list of recurring invoices, here are all the different recurring invoices that are going to happen based on this QuickBooks Desktop account. And they are listed alphabetically. Okay. But I can resort any one of these columns. If I want to look at, maybe I have things called my equipment rental and I want to go look at those, I can begin typing in here any one of the search criteria that I want to use. If I want to look up equipment, I can do that. I only have one of those. Or if I want to look up rental, if I have more than one of those, if I had a recurring invoice that was named by that. So that makes it easy for you guys to kind of filter your different kinds of recurring invoices and look at them easily on one screen. Then if you want to edit it, all you have to do is click where it says monthly equipment rental here. That's going to bring up the detail of this particular recurring invoice. So this tells me that this goes to my Oasis testing company client. I can put in a description here, which is an internal field for you guys that only shows on the Recur360 side. The client never sees this. I determine the frequency or interval of when this recurring invoice happens. So this one is going to occur monthly on the first day of every month. But I can set it up as a daily, a weekly, an annual, whatever schedule I want to set that on. And if it's, let's say, for instance, semi-annual, then I can do this once every 6 months on the first day of the month. As I update this information, my top right of my screen will always tell me when the next occurrence will happen. So this one will happen again on 8/1 because that's the next time since the last time it happened that it will occur. Also, this particular recurring invoice, I set it to end by a certain date. So in 2020, this is going to stop happening. And again, the module tells me that February 1st of 2020 will be the last time that it happens. So a lot of flexibility in your intervals and how and when these happen and how they stop. If I simply tell it to stop none, then it is an open-ended recurring invoice, and it will happen every 6 months until I come in and cancel it or until I come in and set an end date. Okay. Again, going down the left-hand side of the screen, keep it going here, we bring over some information from QuickBooks. Again, we're connected to a desktop account, so I'm going to bring over the terms from that customer automatically, as well as the class if you're using that feature at the invoice level or the item level, depending upon where you've set it in QuickBooks. I can link to both of those. I'm going to post this into the default accounts receivable AR account. And then if I have sales reps assigned, those will list here and I can define those, and then that will post on the invoice into QuickBooks as well. Because this is going to make an exact invoice in QuickBooks of whatever line items I choose to add to this recurring invoice. So right now I'm adding this part number here called a P64. I put 24 of those at $12.50. I can add another line item here as well. And if I want to add, let's say, a service item, this is your items list from QuickBooks. So the item has to exist as an inventory, a non-inventory, or a service item in QuickBooks in order for us to be able to add it to the list here and put it on an invoice. So I'm going to choose my services performed item here. I'm going to assign it to a class, January accessory sale, put in 1 at my rate, and the amount that I'm going to charge the client. My description came over directly from QuickBooks, and I can leave that as it is, or if this is going to be a recurring invoice that happens every 6 months, I have the ability to have the system automatically insert dates into that description as well. So I can say for period covering, and then have it automatically insert the invoice date. So in this case, that would be 8/1 is the next time this occurs, through, and then have it insert the day before the next invoice date, which was February 1st. So this would say January 31st. And then I set up this programming of that once and save it, and I never have to modify it again. Every time this recurring invoice generates an invoice, it will automatically put in the proper dates in the invoice date in the next invoice date field and send it out with that description to the client. Another feature of the recurring invoices, we were adding line items. I'm going to go backdate this particular recurring invoice so we can see that maybe I should have started it today instead of it happening on the first day of the month. And I want to prorate this because it should have happened July 1. So I'm going to prorate this first invoice for the remainder of this month. So from 7/8 to 8/1 is going to create an invoice. And on it, I want to prorate all of these items. So I see here that that first prorated invoice right now is $39 for this one, $16.57 not including tax for this line item because that's taxable. And then I can add an additional one-time setup charge, say an account fee or a membership fee that I want to add as a one-time charge to this first invoice. So if I want to add that, or it's a piece of hardware, a piece of equipment would be another good example of something that might not be prorated. So I'm going to give you a keyboard this first time. And I'm not going to prorate that one line item. And I'm also going to delete that after the first time because it is a one-time only charge. So again, set this up once in the system, save it, and you never have to do it again. So now that particular invoice, the first time is $62.79. The next time it happens for the full 6-month charge would be $434.38. And then I press the submit button down at the bottom. That will save that recurring invoice and put it in the queue. Then every night, Recur360 goes through the list of recurring invoices to check when the next recurring period is supposed to be. And so if I sort by the recurring period here, I see there's this one invoice that would get generated on 7/8, okay? And then the next one will be 7/14. I don't have to do anything to let that automatically go. I can just let the system create it. It'll at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, it'll check, see that it hasn't done that, and make the invoice and send it out to the client. If I wanted to get this out to the client right away, though, I wanted them to see a copy of it, I can press the push transactions button, and that's the kind of review everything immediately. So go look through the list, see what needs to be created as a recurring invoice, and generate that invoice, and potentially process the payment or whatever I need to do while that is happening. So while that is green, it is currently going through my list of open recurring invoices, which I have a total of 25 of them at the moment on different schedules, and checking to see which one of them needs to create an invoice. Um, and while that's happening, I can go ahead about the system and do other things. I can go, let's look at the collection center while that's processing. So my collection center is my list of all my open accounts receivable from QuickBooks, whether that invoice was generated by Recur360 or manually out of QuickBooks. I'm going to see it in the list here. And I always see it by my oldest invoices first. So from last September, I still have this old invoice that is 195 days old. Okay. And I can also see whether or not I have scheduled to send out pending emails to those clients. So do I have any automatic accounts receivable notices kind of set up regarding this invoice? I don't. So I can very quickly here in the system pick, let's just pick some of these old ones. I want to pick all 3 of these, all 4 of these, and I want to email notifications to these people that their invoices are overdue. So I've checked off the ones that I want. I press the send email button, and I can say, please remember, put a note in here and say, past due more than 90 days. Okay. I can schedule those. I can send them again once right now, or I can schedule them to go out every 2 days. Okay. And I press schedule. Then, again, the system is automatically going to send out that notification and schedule that to automatically go every 3 days. And I don't ever have to do anything again. And I can see that that is scheduled and pending. If I look at that recurring invoice here, boom, there I go, that it's scheduled to go every 2 days. Okay. Now, while we were working, that particular recurring invoice for my customer went out. I'm going to see that that got sent out to the client. I see under my statuses that it created an invoice and that that's pending to post over to QuickBooks. Okay. Another feature of Recur360 connected to QuickBooks Desktop is under my settings, I have the ability to tell it to wait to send that invoice email until the invoice number gets assigned by QuickBooks, because I need to have the invoice number go out on a copy of that as well in the email that I send to the client. So this particular email to that driven CRM customer hasn't been emailed yet because the invoice number has not been issued by QuickBooks. So it's pending in the list here. So what I would need to do now is run QuickBooks and open that up and run the QuickBooks Web Connector. That will process that and then therefore email that invoice to the client. So let me get that started. I should have probably launched QuickBooks before we did this, guys. But you see in here that that's going to update my customer information for my cash sale customer. It's also going to send 3 different invoices and 2 different payments into QuickBooks as soon as I fire up my QuickBooks Web Connector. Okay. So those remain pending in there, and I can still do things in Recur360 as long as that's happening. I don't need to worry about waiting on that. I would just want to make sure that that runs periodically. So typically we advise somebody, whoever is in the office often and going to be in launching QuickBooks and have that running, would be able to have that QuickBooks Web Connector program running. That is a program that can only run on one computer in your organization. If you're familiar with the QuickBooks Web Connector, it's how a lot of applications talk to QuickBooks Desktop. So I'll go ahead and launch that, and then I'll get my Web Connector running and let that sync over. And then we'll talk about the other options that are in Recur360 while that's syncing. So let me just get that launching. And that kind of covered our recurring invoices options, guys, as well as our collection center. Next thing I do want to talk about is our recurring payments module. As I said, that's kind of the third major component of Recur360, and it's one of our newer features that we've added. It gives you the ability to collect a recurring payment or establish a payment plan for a client, let's say, who's made like a large invoice purchase, or they're very far behind in their accounts receivable and they want to be able to go do a payment plan and say, hey, catch me up and process a card for $200 every 2 weeks until my payment is caught up. Okay. I'm going to see who I want to set up a recurring payment plan for. I'm going to go to my customer list in Recur360, and I'm going to sort it by the open balance due. So who is my most past due, highest balance customer? So if I just click on that right here, it's going to sort it by that column. Okay, and I've got this discount warehouse customer owes me $16,000. If I look at them again, I'm going to see that there are their open invoices. They have 2 recurring invoices that happen for me, and they have 2 payment plans established already that have both finished. They've been canceled or they're done. So I'm now going to go add another new recurring payment plan for them using this button in the upper right-hand corner and say that I want to set up a payment. Again, I can do it against this open balance invoice, or I can just do it as a basic payment plan, not necessarily linked to an invoice. If I link it to the invoice, the advantage of that is when it posts the payment in the QuickBooks, the payment goes against that invoice, and I can tell the system to automatically stop once that invoice has been fully paid. So now I set up the schedule. So I would say, okay, this one's going to happen weekly, every 1 week on Monday, beginning tomorrow. I'm going to end when it's fully paid, and I want to start it today. So I'm going to, again, backdate it to today. So it's going to happen one time today. I want to automatically charge their payment form on file. So I check this box here. And then I'm going to be able to see what payment methods I have saved for them. I don't have one for them yet. I can add one manually on the fly here. So if they were to say, okay, go ahead and charge my card, here's the card number. Okay, I type in the card number, and then I type in all the other information as well. It is encrypted on the screen, by the way, but if you want to just double check it when you're doing your data entry, you can click the show button, and it'll show you what information you've put in there. And then their card information, and I'm going to press create. That will then save that card information on their account and make it available for me to use for this payment plan. So that is double checking that it's a real valid card number, that I've entered it in the proper format, and that is saving it on their account. Okay, so now I can use it here. If I want to email that to the client to tell them, hey, here's a copy of your receipt for the payment that we processed. It's a Visa, it knows that, so it matched the payment method. I put in the amount that I'm going to charge them. Let's say it's going to be $500. And then any message I want to go out on that email that goes to them. And then I press submit. And now that's got a scheduled recurring payment against that particular invoice to get processed for that client. So Discount Warehouse has got that against that invoice. Now, while I was doing all of that, my web connector finished processing all of those recurring invoices, and I got a few emails. So the email that the client gets is something that looks like this. So I download a picture. You can put your logo in these emails and personalize and brand these emails that go out. This one says, thank you for doing business with us. Your invoice is below. Please contact us. Also, this particular recurring invoice for the testing company is set to automatically charge that person's credit card a number of days later. So it lets them know that on the 15th of the month, their payment form is automatically going to be charged because I told it to process that payment form, 10 days later. Here are the line items of that particular invoice. So there is my P64 items and my service item. The service period said covering 7/8 through 7/31. So that's that dynamic date field that I had programmed in. And the keyboard also got added to this. So their balance due is $62.97. Okay. They, in addition, get a fully PDF copy, full page PDF copy of that invoice as well. And that looks similar to your regular QuickBooks invoice. So here I've got the invoice, I've got the invoice number, bill to and ship to information. There's my QuickBooks invoice number 253 that came in automatically. That's what we were waiting on for that invoice to go out. All the line items on there, payment method, and other information. And that's all I have to do. So now the client got a copy of that. That exists now as an invoice in QuickBooks. So if I go look at my customers and I go look at invoices for a testing company, they were listed under Oasis. I'm going to see there's a new invoice there. There's a payment in there as well. So there's invoice number 253. And that looks just like it did in Recur360. So here are my line items that are on that invoice. There's my P64, there's my services performed with the date information there. Okay. And the payment that came over as well that shows up in my customer center. So if I close this screen out here, go back to my job, there's a payment that posted today as well, a $300 payment on a Visa. That comes into QuickBooks just as if it were processed on the QuickBooks side. We incorporate what is called the metadata into that as well. So it knows that it was a Visa charge, and it knows on this one that it applied to invoice number 250. Okay. Now, for some reporting and trackability of information that comes into Recur360 from QuickBooks, into QuickBooks from Recur360, one of the things that you will see is we like to add a field to our report that is called the memo field, because we are going to show you, if I look at my whole transactions list, I've added it here. The memo field always shows you the Recur360 information. So I've got the Recur360 ID number as well as the payment ID number, any information like that that needs to be linked back to Recur360 so that we can link those two activities together. And it gives you then on the QuickBooks side the reportability of what information was put in here by Recur360. So here's the memo field down here at the bottom that I was referring to that fills in. So you're always going to have an audit log of what things were automatically put into QuickBooks by Recur360. And now, since that information has come over, let's go back over to my testing company and see what happened to that next recurring invoice. So if I look at it now under my recurring invoices screen, and I go back and look at testing company, I can see that they have the next invoice that's supposed to happen is going to happen again on 8/1. And when I look at that recurring invoice, my keyboard item will no longer be on there, and it's no longer set to prorate because it happened the first time. It's now a full invoice for the full month for the next month for $434. And I didn't have to do anything else with it. So the payment that came in and posted over, if I go back into Recur360 and go to our reports, and I go to a payment report, I can see an invoice history report or a payment report. And if I want to double check my batches to compare my dollar amounts and see, okay, how much was deposited via a certain batch or on a certain date, I can do that in my payment history report here. So I can see a list here of all payments that were processed. I can check for payments on a certain date. So I want to only see things that were done today. Boom, there's one payment that went in today. So I can very quickly download that to a CSV, get a total on it, and make sure that my batch amounts match. Okay. And now that we're talking about payments, let's talk about what kind of payments we can connect to Recur360. because Recur360 can connect directly to Intuit Merchant Services, but if you're not on that, I can also connect to other payment processors as well. So I can do Intuit Merchant Services, Recur360 payments, Stripe, Authorize.net, Elavon, or USA ePay. And I have some different options depending upon which payment processor you've connected to. Here I've connected this one to my Intuit Merchant account, so that's how it's connected. And I can therefore, because of that, our integration with Intuit allows us to sync the ACH statuses of each of your funding statuses on any ACH transactions from QuickBooks. So if I tell it I want to sync with my ACH statuses, because let's face it, I put in the ACH, the payment gets made, it gets put in as a payment into QuickBooks. However, 4 days later, it might not necessarily get funded because it might have been insufficient funds or something like that that would cause the payment to come back and not actually get deposited into my bank account. So if I press that sync with ACH statuses and then I go look in QuickBooks at my reports, I can see my history here and I can see the statuses of those ACH transactions. So of the ones that I have processed so far, they have all succeeded. So don't have to worry about any of them not being funded. If they do not get funded in QuickBooks Desktop, you would need to go remove the payment, similar to how you do for an insufficient funds in a normal environment. So in QuickBooks, you would remove that payment from that invoice. It would show back up in our collection center, and then you could email it again to the client to get a different payment method or to process that ACH again and try and see if there are more funds in their account now. While we're talking about this though, that is with QuickBooks Desktop. If I switch now to my QuickBooks Online company, and I'm gonna go to my Sandbox account there, when I do an ACH status with QuickBooks Online, I can have the system automatically take an action based on that funding status. So here you notice these have all succeeded, so no action was taken. But in that online account, if I go to my settings and I go to my payments and I pick Intuit Merchant Services here, I can tell the system that if a card is declined, or an ACH, excuse me, is declined or voided using Intuit Merchant Services, that if it's a void, I want to void the payment in QuickBooks, or I want to delete the payment in QuickBooks if it's been declined. I like to do the void, that way I still have the record of it in QuickBooks Online, but you could literally delete the payment and then have the system automatically email a new invoice to the client. So again, just trying to help with your accounts receivable and your funding statuses. Instead of you having to go in QuickBooks and check it and manually do things, you could have someone who's not even logged into QuickBooks at all just sync with the ACH status and have the system remove that payment, re-email the client, and get you paid again. Okay. So that's one of the syncs that we offer to be able to automate information back and forth between different payment processors. You also see here that my QuickBooks Online connected account, I have connected to QuickBooks, to Authorize.net for my credit cards, because I want to take advantage of, at the time, the free ACH from QuickBooks Online and still do credit cards through somebody else. You have that option as well there. So if I can sync with Authorize.net, Authorize.net has something they call their Customer Information Manager, or their SIM, where they keep credit card information and they can let a client update credit card information either via that client's shopping cart or another way that that customer would update their card information outside of Recur360. We have a sync built that would check that information to see if a client's card had changed. It would automatically save that changed card information into Recur360 here as well, to keep, again, that card up to date and accurate. The last part of being able to keep that information updated and accurate is under our settings. In our account, we have the ability to automatically send notifications of cards about to expire. Again, we're keeping your card for a recurring payment set up. We want to make sure that card's up to date. So maybe 1 month ahead of time before your card expires, we're going to send you an email notification to the client that they need to update their card. Anytime any of these notifications go out to clients, by the way, there is that click here to pay online link. So this is what the email looks like. And when they click that pay here online link, they're going to be taken to a page that is specific to them. So this is my OOTB testing customer. They have 5 invoices that are past due with you, that they have not fully paid, for, and they can update their payment information. So they can either choose to pay some of these invoices, I want to pay 2 of them, or if I can't pay this full invoice here, maybe I only want to pay $100 towards this one, so they can pay the full invoice or a portion of that invoice. And so right now it's going to show me they're going to pay $600 on 2 invoices. They put in their card information or their ACH information, depending upon what you, as the Recur360 account holder, have enabled for them. Because I can limit this. Maybe they've had a failed ACH before, so I only want them to be able to do credit card. Or the other way around. I don't want to pay the credit card processing fee because this guy has a high invoice amount, so I only want him to be able to do ACH. So you can restrict that on a customer by customer level. They enter their card information, and the system says this is going to store your payment information and turn on auto pay for any future recurring invoices that you have. So if this box is checked by default, that means any recurring invoice that OOTB has is going to be updated with this card information. If they only want to pay just this invoice, they can uncheck that, and then this card will only be used to process for this $600. Okay. Again, let me go ahead and enter this so you see. Okay, what that looks like when they enter it and save their card information. They'll fill in their address information, and they have to check off that they're not a robot, and then they press submit, and that's going to process their card. Oh, I didn't wait for it to finish that I was not a robot. And do you want to pay these 2 invoices? They say okay, and that processes. You, as the business owner, then would get an email that a payment has been made, if I put in a valid card number, and then they, as the customer, get an email paid receipt as well. The client also has the ability to re-email themselves any of their open invoices as well. So they can send themselves a copy of a past invoice at any time. They can see open invoices, and if I enabled it, they're historical invoices too. Okay. And you have the ability to limit how far back they can see historical invoices. Let's say my accounts receivable from 2 years ago is a mess and I haven't cleaned it up. In Recur360, under the main screen here, I can go back as well under my email settings, and this is where I can limit what happens on the Pay Online link. So I want to allow them to view their their past invoices. For my sandbox company right now, it was not even enabled at all. And I only want them to be able to go maybe 2 months back. So from May 1st on is where they can see past invoices from. Okay. Here in this screen is where you see how I've connected my payment processors. So my credit card processor was set to authorize.net, but my ACHs are going to go through Intuit automatically. So no matter what that client selects in his Pay Online link here, if he happens to put in a credit card, that's going to go through authorize.net. If he puts in an ACH, that's going to go through Intuit automatically. I don't have to do anything. Okay. And then this is, again, where I mentioned you can brand things. So you put in your company information, pick a color, put your logo in here, and do things like that. You can also adjust the text that goes out on the different emails that are sent to clients. So that open invoice due message says this, when they pay, that's what that's going to say, an overdue message, and then a recurring payment message, and a payment failure message. And a little bit of customization is available on what kinds of information goes out on that invoice PDF that they see. So if I want to preview that right now, this is what the invoice PDF looks like. And it's pretty static as far as the layout goes, but you do have some flexibility in that you can set it up to either show empty billing and or shipping addresses, and you can show a credit card authorization form and an ACH authorization form, which I have turned on in my desktop account. So I'll show you guys what that looks like if we switch that. So here, if I preview that one's got an ACH form on it. So the last page is going to give them this anytime they email to themselves. So if you have a lot of clients who print invoices and want to be able to fill out a form and send it back to you, you can automatically include that form in the PDF. And then you notice here also in my desktop connected account, I have the ability to remove some items from my invoice as far as the, the part numbers go. So if I don't want to show the part number on that invoice or the sales tax or things like that, you have some invoice settings here that you guys can customize. So the purpose of Recur360 really was to help automate all of that recurring invoice payment option as well. And as I said, we can do split payment processing. So I process the invoice on the 1st of the month and process the payment on the 15th of the month. Okay. And then you set it up once in here and then you forget about it. Okay. And the next area was our collection center to be able to automatically email out those notifications. I call it the how annoying do you want to be? Do you want to send a notice to this person every single day until they pay the invoice? Or maybe just once a week, or maybe once every other week. You have that flexibility automatically as well. And then that third new payment processing recurring payment plan option as well. And those are kind of some of the flexibility and ease of use of the Recur360 side. This will also more than likely potentially limit your need for your users to have to be in QuickBooks, especially if it's QuickBooks desktop type environment and they're not necessarily sitting at their desk where they can open the QuickBooks file. They can log into Recur360 from anywhere they have internet access and be able to update that information and send out invoices and process things without having to get into QuickBooks and have access to QuickBooks. And then for you as the Pro Advisor, you have the advantage of switching back and forth between customer accounts here. And these are separate QuickBooks company files, as I said, and branded entirely separately. So their company information, their colors, their emails that go out, everything is entirely different in how they operate and how they function. And then you can switch between any of them at any time. So Jennifer, I'm not sure if there were any questions or comments or suggestions during this. I kind of wanted to open it up and give everybody a few minutes to ask any questions that they might have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Barb. There were a couple questions that were coming in as you were going through the presentation, but you really ended up covering all of those through your demo. So a couple people had asked about seeing the online side of things, and then a couple seconds later you jumped into online. So I think you did a great job covering all of the features that Recur360 has to offer. One thing that I kind of wanted to touch on, and maybe you can jump in as well, is who really benefits from Recur360. I know that even in the franchise space, we have customers that are using this. Anyone who really has that recurring payment kind of a business model. So security companies, gyms, clubs, fitness centers, those types of things where people are paying that same amount over and over and over. I know my daughter's dance studio they are looking into using Recur360 because they've got, you know, how many hundreds of dancers whose families are just paying that same amount over and over and over. We're writing checks and it's kind of antiquated. So it's really exciting if they're going to jump on Recur360. But did you just have a little bit of insight for the folks on the line and who will be watching this as it is recorded, as they're looking to recommend Recur360 to their clients? What kind of client is a great fit for Recur360?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Jen. For anybody who's really that service business recurring type model is a tuition based. I have a few private schools who use it, as you said, alarm companies, landscaping companies, bookkeeping type companies, anybody who has that monthly recurring revenue subscription model type of a business. We do also have a couple of franchise or companies who use it to process royalty type payments to their franchisees because they have the ability. It's a lot easier to edit this recurring invoice here to put in what your sales are to calculate your monthly royalty payment for something like that. I have a few marketing type companies that are good fits for that as well. Or anybody who has a collection type model where they send out invoices, because those invoices could be generated in QuickBooks if you'd like, if they're very specific and you have a way that your system maybe automatically generates an invoice into QuickBooks and pushes an invoice into QuickBooks for you. You can then bring them into the collection center and email them from here to give that customer the pay online option if they'd like. So kind of adds on to that model as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a question about batch invoicing and how that is handled in Recur360.
Sure. And when you're saying batch invoicing, I'm guessing that you mean the current memorized transactions in QuickBooks maybe, or because really we are meant to replace that whole memorized transaction part of QuickBooks. So you create the recurring invoice directly in Recur360 and let it process. Or if you already have those memorized batch transactions set up in QuickBooks, you could let QuickBooks generate the invoice, and then it would show as an open invoice here in our collection center, and you could email it from there as well.
Okay, thank you. So she did clarify a little bit about setting up multiple customers who would pay the same amount.
That for us would be the easiest way to do that is once you have set up that recurring invoice for your first customer. Let's say, again, I wanted to repeat this new pool service option. I have a pool service for every one of my clients, and I could create it once. So I would set up the first recurring invoice at one time of the items that I'm going to charge them for and the amounts. And then I would simply press the duplicate recurring invoice up here at the top and give it the next customer name. So it is a two-step process to be able to tell it, okay, now I want to do this for testing company. So boom. Now, and then I just press submit. And now I have a second one for that next customer, and that would repeat on the same schedule. So now if I search for pool, I have two of them.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for a company who has a mix of invoices. Some are monthly and recurring and all the same, and others are just a one-time invoice, not recurring. Would Recur360 still work for them?
Absolutely, because they could set up all their recurring invoices on here very easily, and then they forget about them. They don't have to do them again. And then in Recur360, technically you can set up a one-time invoice. It's just a recurring invoice that only happens once. So for that one-time invoice, you'd go create a recurring invoice that happens daily every 1 day and then ends after one occurrence. So that would create the one-time invoice. I do have some clients also who find it easier to create that one-time invoice in QuickBooks and then have it sync over and let Recur360 create the recurring invoices. So they kind of are a hybrid and they use both systems to create invoices. But the customer that gets the invoice with the Pay Online link is still going to be able to see all their open invoices when they look at them, no matter whether they were created by Recur360 in the recurring module or individually in QuickBooks. They see them the same.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, that is a nice feature that you can do that, you know, the recurring or just the one time and still manage them all in one place. So that's really nice. And one thing I just kind of wanted to mention as well is, since it was our in-house developers who really wrote this app from scratch, you know, we created it from the ground up. As users are asking questions or saying, you know, I really wish it did this, or I really wish it did that, you know, they're working constantly on making updates and adding features. And so we do do a webinar like this every quarter. Barb is so gracious to give me your time and present on the things that are new. So if you come back in a couple of months, and you know, you might see on our website that we are doing an update on, or a webinar about the updates that we have for Recur360. That's just a really great benefit, I think, of this product, is that we do listen to the end users. We're listening to people who are referring us out to their customers as well, as to the things that are working well or the things that maybe should be tweaked or different features that people are hoping for. So
And
it's just a great.
That's a great point too. And Jennifer, we also, as you mentioned, since we have our own in-house developers and we wrote the software, could offer custom versions of the software as well. If there's something very specific to your business model or your customer's business model that might not benefit everybody, we could still write it as a custom version just for them, and then they would have their own version. And when she was talking about some of the new features, a couple of the new features that are upcoming really shortly is the ability for us to add specific user logins. Right now, as I mentioned, everyone shares the same login ID if they're connected to one Recur360 account like I am here. But we're going to be adding the ability for you to add specific users and permission levels for them, therefore, to restrict what kinds of things they can do and see. And also, we're going to be streamlining that one-time invoice screen. We understand that creating a recurring invoice and make it recur once is kind of a little bit cumbersome to create a one-time invoice. So they're working on streamlining that area as well as a new feature.
That's awesome. Very exciting for sharing that with us, Barb. I appreciate that. So that's really all the questions that have come in, and just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. So Barb, did you have any closing comments before we wrap this up today?
No, I think, as I mentioned, we really tried to solve for those three different areas that kind of are challenging a lot of times with those business models to create the recurring invoice itself, do the collection center, and then process a payment plan type of environment.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to take this back and share my screen. I have Barb's contact information up there. To those of you who are watching, if you did want to learn a little bit more, or maybe just take an even deeper dive with Barb, we can set up a one-on-one demo for you. But if you do have clients that you think that this would really work for them, we would really appreciate you to just send them our way, and we can talk to you about some different benefits that we can extend to you as well. For those referrals, we do really appreciate that. I know word of mouth is the cheapest and best form of advertising, so we do appreciate that. And if you have any other questions, you can visit our website. Again, this session is being recorded, and I'll send out an email with that link to you. So if you needed to reference back to anything, you'll have that as a resource as well. So Barb, thank you so much for your time today, and everyone on the line, thank you for joining us. We look forward to working with you soon.